All right, so we'll take a little bit of a step backward. So just explaining big picture. So Architecture 2030 was the original nonprofit organization that created the 2030 challenge, which was issued by Architecture 2030. And then the AIA created the 2030 commitment, which is not different. It's actually just AIA's tool to track this challenge. And then on the next slide, I think we're going to deal with a little bit of a time delay on the slide advancement. So then that is leading into the AIA code, and you can advance again, AIA code top 10 measures so we can enhance our impact. So I'm going to go through some of the submission basics. I'm going to let everybody know here, most of this presentation deck is the same as the presentation deck we gave last year. So if anything that is on these couple of slides contradicts the very first slide that Ismar showed you, just refer back to the two design award submission decks for the final. And again, like you said, reach out if there's any questions, and we can kind of help figure that out. Or we're adding each year, so there really shouldn't be anything contradictory. But with that said, reach out if you have any questions. So number one, you have to be a signatory. So you need to sign up and be a signatory to the 2030 commitment. So this is a requirement whether you're submitting for a built project or a next submission. So, and the requirement we're having here, and we'll show you an example later, is you must submit proof of that signatory status. And we'll show you an example. So next slide. Next thing we're looking for is energy performance metrics. So it's going to be required for built projects to be eligible for honor status. If you don't have those energy performance metrics, you can still submit for an award. You will just be ineligible for honor. So there's still merit and citation that are open, that are available. And in order to qualify what the metrics you're going to give us, we need you to also give us proof of that project submitted in the AIA DDX website. Now, projects without energy metrics, like I said, are only going to be eligible for merit or citation status. I got ahead of myself. So next slide. Next, we're kind of diving into three different options. You can do either of a water conservation. So one of these three options is required for built projects to be eligible for honor status. So landscaping must include only local plantings without irrigation for all outdoor site improvements. Ismar just kind of showed you this was last year's requirement, and it's ramping up to that 100%. Correct, Ismar?
And provide a report.
And provide a report. The second option is to do an embodied carbon or a embodied carbon assessment or a life cycle analysis. Team's going to get into some examples of that later on. And the third, and we put this in here because we know water conservation from landscaping and embodied carbon can be challenging to achieve on interiors projects. So demonstrate a 25% improvement on lighting power density below local code. Now, if you're a building project, you can still choose this as a path. We just know this is probably the path of least resistance for an interiors project that submits. Next. Then what we're doing, again, if you're going to be submitting for honor, we need a sustainability focused slide, minimum 1, maximum 3, that kind of visually highlights the performance measures, either energy, water, or embodied carbon in your presentation deck. Next. So again, for built in next, we're going to highlight one of the additional code top 10 measures as defined by the AIA's framework for design excellence. So that QR code will take you to the framework for design excellence. I believe Ismar also had it earlier in the presentation deck. These are the categories that are in that deck. We are already asking you to address energy, water, or resources. So what you're going to be looking for is either integration, equity, ecosystems, discovery, economy, well-being, or change.
May I add something, Anthony?
Go for it.
This is a great opportunity for different projects that either are doing housing or an ADU, right? Because those can qualify or actually meet the economy framework. which is really, really important, right, for the housing crisis. Then there's other projects like parks that address equity. There's projects that address integration. So this is an opportunity for you guys to actually highlight the best values of your project. I think people try to do everything, but I think they should really, really focus on the best value that your project brings. And I think that'll give you a great chance to being recognized.
Yeah. And really leaning into the design for excellence framework can, if you do it right, it can actually help you tell the story of your project in a more meaningful way.
Okay, next.
Next. So there are a few exemptions. So cityscapes and installations are not required for built in next. You still have to be a signatory, but you do not have to, you're exempt from the performance requirements to be eligible for honor or that DDX upload documentation. For interiors, so built interiors projects have less energy metrics to track, therefore only lighting power density is required. And third is no conditioned space. So built projects without any conditioned space are exempt from metric requirements and will be eligible for the honor consideration. But with that in mind, on the next slide, I've had a couple of teams do this in the past, claiming no conditioned space when there is will be noticed. So, you know, what we've actually had some jurors frown upon, a little bit of deception. So just be honest about what it is. If you don't have the metrics, just own up to it. All right, next. So here we're going to go through some of the minimum. This is the minimum requirement to even submit for an award. So all firms must be an AIA 2030 signatory. And this is the reason for this is with greater awareness of architecture saving contribution to the climate change comes our responsibility to do something about it. I'm going to tell a little story that I actually tell my students, and it's something I've been kind of talking about internally as a better way to understand the impact we can make on embodied carbon in our projects. So if any one of us, and I think 100 of our best friends decide to become vegan for 50 years, that's the same carbon impact of a designer picking one low embodied carbon carpet for a 75,000 square foot space. We can have a significant impact. I'm not saying that don't be a vegan. What I'm saying is we can actually pull some pretty significant levers. And participating in 2030 is one of those ways that we can really kind of help us push those things forward. Next. So if a project includes an executive architect, a design architect, an architect of record, all three of those firms need to be signatories for the project to be eligible. So you can't just lean on, if you have a project with a design architect and an architect of record, you're going to lean on one of those two as the signatory. Both need to be signatories. We're really trying to get to the point where we have more firms being signatories and reporting and being responsible with reporting on projects. Now, becoming a signatory is actually really easy. So if you flip to the next slide, you're going to go to the AIA 2030 commitment page, and we're going to talk about how you participate in this program to demonstrate your leadership in the industry and put you on a path of continuous improvement. But we all know, we've said it for years, you can't improve what you're not measuring. They have a commitment letter. So buildings account. No, you could have went for it, didn't work. So buildings account for nearly 40% of greenhouse gas emissions. They don't have to. Now, joining the commitment is a very easy 3-step process. We're going to share this presentation. So this link will take you to the website where you're going to create a personal account. The website might be down right now. So, but we'll see. It should be back. It should be back up. I was testing it earlier today. It was fine. Ismar was just testing it. It was down. So next page. So you're going to join or create your firm profile. If you're doing it for your firm the first time, you're going to create a firm profile. If your firm already exists, you're just going to join it. There's actually this link will actually take you to a YouTube video that the AIA put together, and is very easy how-to on how to kind of go through either one of these 2 steps. Next. You're going to upload your commitment letter. So the AI actually has some templates you can use. I remember when I did it for Gensler years ago, I downloaded the standard, I uploaded it, and then, a week or two later, we uploaded a new one. We had a little bit of a time to kind of download and digest really what it meant to us. And it's not something that has to live there permanently as you upload it. As you make changes or you go through changes in the organization, you can upload, an updated commitment letter saying how far you've gone. Next. Now, this is what we will be looking for when we ask you to demonstrate proof that the organization is a signatory to the 2030 commitment. So we get this question a lot, and that's why I tried to highlight it here, but I'm going to say it out loud. So we want to see where that says Gensler quote commitment letter PDF. We do not need to see a copy of that letter. We just need to see that you have your letter uploaded, because that's part of the kind of completing the signatory status. So again, we do not need to see the letter. We just need to see it on this image. The sustainability action plan, we don't even need to see that on there. That will take a little bit of time to put together if your firm is not already a signatory. So we do not expect to see the action plan already uploaded there. If you're already there and you're already at that point, great, but know that it's not required for any of the design award requirements. Next. So this is really just for your information. Again, it's not required for design award submissions. So signatories are asked to document what you consider a sustainability action plan within 6 months of joining. Some companies have this on hand. Some may need to create it from scratch. The guide linked here, I think, is a 20 or 30-page document that really outlines, here's all the things you need to potentially think about. Some of them may apply to you. Some of them may not to apply. You have to kind of choose your own path. But again, this is for your information only. It is not needed for the design award submission. Next. And then lastly is reporting the projects in the DDX, or the design data exchange. You guys might actually look at this as nothing more than tracking at, in the beginning, that might be the case. The intent of the DDX platform is to encourage continuous tracking of your projects. So it's a design collaborative. We collectively gain a better understanding. So if you're submitting a project for the design awards, you have to submit that project in the DDX platform, which will get you to what I think is the next slide, which is this is a snapshot of one of the projects after it's been submitted. So it'll show you where this project ranks as far as energy savings, your firm average if you already have multiple projects in the system, and it'll show you similar project types and where they rank. It'll give us the baseline, which in this case, all the baselines for buildings is going to be CBEX 2003. It's going to say what your target savings is and what your goal is.
Okay. Again, if you have any questions about this, or as you mature into the AIA 2030 commitment and you need support, feel free to use that email that I will share at the beginning so that we can support you at every step of the way.
Energy use intensity, EUI, in case anybody is unfamiliar with the term, it's just the total energy required to operate the building divided by the square footage. I know that's an oversimplified way to think about EUI, and there's probably some engineers on the call who are cringing as I give this little bit of a math lesson. But 50,000 square foot building that consumes 7.5 million kBTUs a year would have an EUI of 150 kBTUs per square foot per year. The easiest way to get this number is to reach out to your engineer, and you're going to ask for what I call a raw EUI number, or what I have actually stated on this screen is we're looking for something that does not include time-dependent valuation, which is how Title 24 takes the cost of energy and factors that into the EUI formula. So your engineers should be able to, if they have their model done correctly, they should be able to pull a non-TDV energy use intensity number for you. Okay.
It's in Title 24.
Title 24, yeah.
Yeah, Anthony, I'm I'll just add,
Or George.
that's an easy number for your engineers to find for you, as something that they have to calculate anyway. So even if there's a slightly different variation, it's not anything more complex. It's something that can be easy pulled out, and they can get you that support and documentation for your submission.
Right. Now, George, where that gets a little bit more complicated is if a team is submitting a project that followed the prescriptive performance measure through Title 24, what I've done in the past is I will ask my engineering partner for their best good faith estimate on what the baseline and design value should be.
That's a great distinction. Prescriptive these days. The baseline's actually very good. So prescriptive model in many ways can be like a really good metric. And you'll find, compared to some of the averages that you've seen for the last few years, that it's progressing really well. So I do think, that could be a question one. If this terminology is unfamiliar for you, you can ask, hey, are we prescriptive compliance or performance compliance? And can you give me a breakdown? It's something that your supporting team members can get you pretty easily.
Absolutely. And on the next slide, now you will not find an EUI value to meet in Title 24. Every new building project has to build a brand new baseline model and then a design model. But what I've done here, this is a very fuzzy range, and the intention here is if you're working on a retail store or an education K through 12, which is right in the middle, those two types, the EUI you should get if you're code compliant with Title 24 should be somewhere between 43 and 23. It's a range. You could be 45, you could be 48. The key thing to keep in mind is if your engineer comes back to you and says, oh, well, here's your EUI, it's 397. That's your indicator that they gave you a time-dependent valuation number. So you should be relatively close to these kind of very fuzzy ranges and values, just to kind of give some kind of trigger on it, because a lot of codes are very resident to kind of give out a number. So we wanted to give you some kind of a guideline. George, any thoughts on that one?
No, I think you nailed it, Anthony. I think if you see something with 3 digits, it normally implies that you have a large process load, whether that be a university with fume hoods or whether it be something with compressed air or some type of manufacturing. But for the non-process driven spaces, you're going to have less than 3 digits.
Yeah. And an interesting exception to that is maybe you're working on an office building, a commercial office building that should be between somewhere between 33 and 60, but let's say half of that floor is a cafeteria for other office use in the building. Look at, your fast food restaurant is going to be between 171 and 301. So if you're looking at a mix of uses, you might start leaning a little bit more towards the larger number, depending on how much of that use is in the space. Okay. Next, Ismar. Interiors is quite a bit easier. So we're just looking for lighting power density calculation. There's 2 ways to calculate it. I mean, this is one of the easier numbers to find. You more often than not don't even need to call up your engineer to get this. It's on one of the early general E-sheets. So there's 2 ways to calculate it. Whole building wattage, which is the total number of lamps times the wattage. Add that all together, and now you're dividing it by the total square footage. So that's your whole building method. I know a lot of times on a higher end projects, we'll use a lighting designer, and they might want to do a space by space analysis. It's a different way. It kind of gives you a little bit more leeway in how much light you're allowed to put in a project. Half a watt for corridors and 1.3 for conference rooms, as opposed to 1.0 as a blanket. As you can see, we're allowed 1.0 in the middle, in the left condition, and 1.04 in the right condition. So you're still going to be in the same rough neighborhood. Next. Here are some of the Title 24 baseline numbers. And what I did this year, I actually added residential. We know single family residential, there is no lighting power density requirement, but in the AIA world, there is a requirement for lighting power density in residential. So That was one of the comments we got last year, that it wasn't code required. So we're clarifying that this year by saying, look, you've got to be 25% if you're taking that lighting power density improvement approach, you got to be 25% better than the 0.7 for residential. And if we go to the next slide, I'm just going to reinforce it. Residential projects are required to calculate the lighting power density. So regardless if required by code or not, you're going to sum all of the wattage for installed lighting. And then, because I know this is how residential works, you're going to make a selection and add the wattage for all those switched outlets that you're intending to use as lamp fixtures. You're going to divide that total watts by your total square footage. George, Ismar, Casey, any add-ons to that? Any questions on that? To make sure that was clear.
Yeah, that's perfect.
That's clear. Thank you.
Okay. So I left this in here, and I don't know how many of you are seeing this. This is an example of a request we've gotten from a client that where, RFP came out and they're telling us that they want us to design a building that is no greater than 35 kBTUs per square foot per year. They go beyond that by saying, when you put together your pitch, your quals deck that demonstrates your experience, they didn't want to see any projects that were above that kBTU per square foot per year as a building performance value. They told us if we don't have the number, we don't qualify to bid on their work. If we don't have any projects that meet that number, we simply do not qualify to bid on their work. And we're starting to see this come out more and more. So everybody who's really been looking at AIA 2030 as a tracking exercise, it's going to become it's already become a very important tracking exercise, because if you can't sort and filter the projects that you have in your portfolio by their performance, you may lose the ability to bid on future work. Next.
Great. Thanks, Anthony. That was a pretty thorough presentation. Hopefully you guys understood that, these requirements are not driven by code, but just by energy reduction and carbon reduction, so that we can lower the emissions, right? 40% of global emissions are caused by our industry, by the AEC industry. So we can start to make adjustments that maybe we can become all vegans. Right now, we wanted to share something with you all. This is an example of LCA report. Casey, would you like to share what they could provide in their submissions?
Yeah, absolutely. So this was one of the two ways that you can upload one of those reports, whether it's an LCA or the landscape irrigation xeriscaping. Right here is just a look at what an LCA report might look like. There is no specific benchmarking and reporting requirements out there at this current moment. Within policy, you'll see CalGreen July 1st, 2022 have its first code go into effect for larger buildings, 50 to 100,000 square foot. You have to look more into that. But these are just some examples you can look at what this might look like. We're really focused on the global warming, GWP, which is the kilograms of CO2 equivalent, which would be at the top left within that LCA graphic. So just take a look at these. There's multiple ways that you can acquire this, whether it's through programs like Tally or One-Click LCA or EC3, but developing this so that way we can see the full LCA life cycle cost analysis of these buildings. Yeah, so this is just a quick look at what that might look like. Please reach out to us, though, if you have more requested information.
And Casey, just to clarify, that's life cycle material.
Yes, yes, excuse me.
Yeah.
Exactly. Specific to, the extraction, manufacturing, installation, and maintenance of products within the building. And then this is a look at the water savings reports that we would be looking for. These examples here aren't showing the 100% water offset or xeriscaping, but you can easily find this within your landscape drawings, showing this Muello reporting or the water efficient landscape worksheet information. So just looking for these calculations to be submitted whether you're going for this, the water savings, or the LCA.
Thanks, Casey.
Mhm.
The water savings is actually pretty easy, right? Because it's actually driven by the landscape architect, and our job is just to steer the landscape architect to make best management practice decisions. And if we wanted to actually save a lot of water takes a lot of energy, by the way. I don't know if you all know that 13 or 14% of the state's energy is used to pump water to Los Angeles from the Owens Valley.
Yeah.
So it's really important to reduce water, not just because water is important, but it also adds to our energy issue. But these are great presentations, and thank you for sharing this, Casey, Anthony, and George. Anthony, do you want to go over the myths and facts?
So just in closing, you know, we've heard that it takes too much time. I've been running all of the AI 2030 submissions for Gensler for the last decade or more. Typical time to input data is, you know, less than 30 minutes. It doesn't require a lot of resources. The program is actually free. There's a lot of helpful resources in the online tool. You do not have to let me just read the third one. I may have poor performing projects in my portfolio. And the next one, I have to achieve the 2030 target. Neither of these are, well, the second one isn't true. The intent is to demonstrate progress more than meeting the target. You do not have to qualify, your projects do not have to qualify for AIA 2030 to be submitted as data. I will tell you personally, I go through 8,000 projects worth of data, and we submit every single real built project, even projects that haven't been built yet. We submit every single project that's a real project to the AIA every single year. We have projects like, say, Shanghai Tower. That was a project we submitted in the system for 7 consecutive years. And as the data improved or the data got more refined, we update that. The system allows you to update that information as you go. So it's more about showing progress than really saying that they comply. And AI does not share your data with anybody else. I can't tell you how many of our projects have non-disclosure agreements. All of those projects are in the AIA system. Nobody can see the detail on it but us, and whatever AIA reports is aggregated and anonymous across the entire industry. Also, projects don't need to be complete. You can actually start a project. You can win a contract for a brand new project today. You can go on, you say, hey, I'm going to create a new entry for this one project. And what that can do for you can actually give you a target goal of what your EUI should be when you enter in, okay, here's how much of the square footage is office versus retail versus parking versus all of those different things. It'll give you a target to work towards, that then you can now start to have a more meaningful conversation with your engineer and the rest of the design team.
Great, thank you. And just to quickly recap before we start the Q&A, for the past few years, we've asked folks to be a 2020 AIA 2030 signatory, to reduce water use or provide an LCA. The last two, water and LCA, and have been for an honor award. Now we're asking for a report, as well as meeting an EUI of 65% or better for the honor award category. For citation and merit, all you have to do is become an AIA 2030 signatory. So hopefully that makes it easy for everybody to understand and to achieve and to move in the right direction. So thank you again for everybody's presentation. And now we're going to go into the Q&A. Does anybody have any questions here? Should I stop sharing? I don't want to stop sharing because I like to go back to any slide. But for the purpose, please unmute yourself. And if you have any questions or concerns, please let us know and we'll try to address it as best as we can.
Well, while we're waiting, I'll reiterate what Ismar just said. Being a 2030 signatory is a baseline requirement in order to submit for an award. And then another thing I wanted to say is, he's right, we're asking for a 65% improvement over CBEX 2003. And I think current Title 24 code, I don't know if it's 2020 or the more recent version, is already in the 55% better than CBEX range. So we're looking at, a 10% better than Title 24. But again, you'll see that when you get the AIA number and what your actual project performance improvement is.
Yeah, Anthony, it might even be less than that in some cases.
Yeah,
You know,
depends on the use.
we at Bureau Happold obviously work with a lot of architects, and we're part of the challenge as well, and reiterate, as fully confidential, and there's no competing interests. It's all about moving the industry forward in the right direction, and really helping and building a community.
Great. And while we wait for questions, I have one for you, George. If a project is, for instance, the State Department, right, using terms or outside of the US, how easy or how hard is it to translate that into PEUIs?
Yeah, it's really simple, to be honest. So, whether you have a state mandate or I don't know, maybe you're working on a university campus out of state, most people have got these aspirations that they're traveling to, and they're just trying to make their own local commitments. But the pure math numbers behind doing conversions are pretty simple, and whether that be your in-house energy expert at your architecture firm, or whether it be your counterpart MEP engineer or sustainability team, they can translate those numbers super quick.
Great, thank you. And also, please feel free to reach out to the Committee on the Environment, to the email that I shared at the beginning of the presentation. If you need support in this step, we would be more than happy to walk you through and support you as part of this process. Thanks, George.
Yeah, no problem.
So anybody has any questions? Is there something on the chat, maybe? Oh, no, that's your note taker, Farouk. Thanks, Hansel. We're going to stick around here. Feel free to type in your question if you need to. These questions are important because somebody else might have the same question. And what we'll do is we'll pull this together as part of our FAQs so that we can also upload it to the website. Your question will be anonymous, and inform anybody that has a similar question. Anthony, for the residential category and lighting reduction, who would be the best person to ask for assistance? Would that be your electrical engineer?
It's interesting because there are, I know there's some small residential projects out there that don't even have, an engineering presence. It's just an architect kind of doing, a small home renovation. It's very easy to do the lighting power density calcs. If you have an engineer, yes, it's your electrical engineer that you want to reach out to. If you, as the architect, are specifying light fixtures, you know better than you know best. You're picking the fixture, you're checking the photometrics. You can actually pull from a schedule. If you're doing it in Revit, you can pull it from a schedule. If you're not doing it in Revit, it's a little bit of Excel. I've got 5 fixture types. Each fixture type has a certain number of quantity, and you can actually just kind of pull and run the numbers on your own. It's not really that challenging. It's just a little bit of work to pull it together.
I'd add as well, even the awareness in the industry from the lighting vendors, they're really, really good at lighting controls and code compliance. So as a free resource, they're normally pretty helpful. You say, hey, I have a target that I want to hit, and I'm worried about fixture X. Do you have a fixture Y that's 20% better on LPD? The real support in that community education is like really growing, and you'll get like a really quick response from your vendors. Yeah,
that's a great statement, George. It's been so long since I worked with one of those lighting vendors that they will do those calcs for you. I totally forgot about that.
Yeah, we have people from Lutron on the call, so they can help as well. Okay.
Tania, we're going to send Mark is going to send out a copy of this presentation with all of those active links. Mark, later tonight, tomorrow?
Tomorrow I will send that out.
Tomorrow.
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Question for Casey. Casey, how difficult is it to do an LCA? If you can't do it in-house, who would you reach out to and get assistance to support a project? Perhaps not for this year, but maybe next year, so that people can prepare as these requirements will remain.
Sure, yeah, especially as we're talking about the new Cal Green requirements coming in. They're likely going to be required to be, I think it's ISO 14044 required, which just means the standard process of doing an LCA with the materials requirements. Basically, if you do it in-house, there's a series of softwares that'll probably cost you $3 to $5 grand a year annually to perform that in-house. Those softwares are pretty easy to use. One-click LCA, Tally, that you could go to. Otherwise, there's a lot of local vendors, obviously, that you can look into, such as Vertical Group, Greg Consulting, Partner Energy, many more that can perform an LCA. The prices are kind of all over the place since it's not a policy requirement yet. But you could probably go out and get one performed between 6 to 10 grand for a smaller project. And then obviously, if you go to a larger entity, it could be much, much higher, dependent on the specificity you're looking for. But a pretty standard one, I would really recommend you try to do it in-house and figure that out, as it's going to be a continuous requirement for your buildings. And if you have a BIM model, it's all those volumetric quantities are right there at your fingertips. It's just more about utilizing the appropriate exportation.
And I believe last time I renewed Tally, it was about $800. So I think
Okay.
Tally is like the most affordable option
So I
that
take
is
that
out
back.
there. Yeah, I think one-click LCA is around 5,000, but it's more robust.
That's right. There was
mhm.
the basic version. Actually, I think Tally, the other version where you can include templates, is about 1,000. So yeah, that makes more sense. So
It's actually
you
very
can,
affordable.
yeah, right. Especially going to do it in-house. And there's a lot of online platforms that have information about how to perform that, as well as tutorials. And feel free to reach out.
Yeah. But with that
YouTube
said,
is wonderful, right? There's
go
so
ahead.
many
What'd you say, George? I'm
YouTube.
sorry.
There's so many YouTube videos that explain it so well. Also, all free at your fingertips.
Yeah. But as you heard, some of the costs for these things, we did want to acknowledge that even for, say for a small residential project or any small project might be even a challenge to bear $1,000 cost. And we understand that, which is why there's that alternate path for a lighting power density reduction if that cost is a hardship for a project.
Mm-hmm.
Zero scaping, no
Yeah.
water. And but yeah, thank you for pointing that out. Let's see, anything else we should cover, Anthony? I don't think we're gonna get any questions.
Yeah, I think we've covered all the bases.
Okay, let's see what else. Okay, what's integration? That's one of the frameworks. Can you explain what integration is, Anthony?
So how often are we bringing in our engineering partners at this schematic design, or even worse, design development? How are we, when they're talking about integration, how are we figuring out and working out all the requirements of a project early on so that we can come up with design solutions with that kind of larger, more holistic vision from the larger design team?
All the time.
Now,
Don't we do that all
what
the
AI,
time?
what Code's looking for from an integration documentation point of view, that I'm not sure off the top of my head.
Okay, so your answer was in the form of a question. Thank you.
Yeah.
So we do it all the time. So that's how you kind of achieve integration as part of the framework of excellence. So I just wanted to make sure that people take advantage of the framework and tell a better story. The idea here is that you're not using this information after the fact, all the way to the end. And I know some of you do have to experience that because you may be on the marketing team or you may be in that sort of construction phase, and the design folks at the very front of the project did not put this together.
Right.
But use it as a guide and as a compass so that later on you don't have to look for the information. You don't have to make up any information. You don't have to do
Ismar,
it.
you just reminded me of a project that I worked on. It was the Clark Museum back on the East Coast.
Mhm.
It was an outdoor water feature. We had no less than 5 separate water consultants on the project. And I remember the meeting that we sat down with all the consultants, and one of the things that Ben Koenig, who was in my New York office, and I asked all of the water consultants was, what do you need and what are you getting rid of? And we went down the line with all 5 of them, and what happened from that very simple question was everybody's need was somebody else's waste. And what that allowed us to do was create a closed loop water supply system, so that because every one of those consultants was planning on getting their source water from the local utility. Once we exposed that everybody's need was somebody else's waste, it then turned into, okay, now we don't need to do that. It actually changed the game on the design for the overall water system on the project.
Yeah, there's always opportunities to enhance the project, to make it better, to reduce energy, to reduce the materials, and to reduce your firm's handprint on the environment. And I think this is a good way to kind of exemplify, showcase, and highlight all your hard work. It takes years, and we understand this. And we want to make it as easy as possible for you to be recognized, but still one step at a time, 1 foot and some inches at a time, to keep pushing the needle so that we can sort of, perhaps still have a future. So with that, I'd like to close this presentation. Thank you, Anthony. Thank you, George, and thank you, Casey, for participating. Thank you to the Design Awards Committee, Hans and Alice, for leading 2024. And thank you, AIA Los Angeles. Have a good night.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Ismar. Great job.
Take care.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you all.
Take care.